Series where we're looking at the top 10 video game settings for today. Now, this is my personal list, and it's probably going to be wildly different from some of those that you have on your own, as well as some of the other projects that other channels have been doing. This is really me looking back at my childhood, and I guess today, how all of these worlds have influenced me in the way that I think about video games and the way that I approach role-playing games. And just because of that, none of these are really in any specific order except maybe the last, 3, 2, 1. But otherwise, I love all of these settings, and this is just basically an arbitrary order until we get, like I said, right down to it. But anyway,
Number 10, Universe of Starcraft.
I never really got into the Starcraft lore until about Starcraft 2, but I did play the original game quite a bit. And as I played the campaign in Starcraft 2, it really quickly rose to one of my favorite worlds, or I guess I should really say universes, because it's a sci-fi franchise. There's a ton of different worlds. But after I did that, I went back and played the original to see, what was set up. Like I said, I had already played the original, but I only ever played multiplayer. So I really got to see the setup between Raynor and Minx and all of that happened, Artanis and everything. The reason I like it is that it's so pure from a science fiction standpoint. It's really set up these three types of races that we see all throughout many different franchises. We have the humans, obviously, and we have the hive mind alien type, in this case the Zerg, and then we have the super advanced telepathic aliens. And as StarCraft 2 played out, it's very much deepened this amazing story that already came from the first game, and it really fleshed out the characters in a way that you wouldn't really see in a regular RTS, and that's one of the reasons why I love it.
Number 9, Ragdoll, Phantasy Star Online.
This is probably one that shows a little bit too much of my personal bias, but as Phantasy Star Online is one of my favorite games ever, it's such a formative game for me personally, I had to put this down here. This world, especially whenever playing through the single player campaign, drips with such a creepiness that kind of reveals itself as you go lower and lower into the bowels of the planet in search for Red Ring Rico. Even more so during episode 2, you get a bunch more of that lore that leads to the boss of Olga Flo, which was actually just a toss-away character in the original game, but much in the way that The Hobbit had the Ring of Power, they really just blew that up into its own big Lord of the Ring franchise, or in this case, Olga Flo has this huge backstory, which I think is really cool. I like it when people do that. Also, I love the music. I love the way that the game embraced the action RPG sci-fi nature of the game. And just a little bit more of a tidbit of information, since my day job is teaching astronomy and astrophysics, I'm kind of partial to Ragdoll, because I think it's more likely just a little twist on the word of Rigel, which is a star in the Orion constellation.
Number 8, Pokemon World.
The world of Pokemon is insanely massive, and I'm not just specifically talking about one particular game. I'm talking about all of them together that exist on this planet. And really, it's been constructed over the past 20 years, and as each iteration has come and gone, it's just added more and more and more to this world that we slowly learn about. And it's sort of a mirror to our own world. At least it's inspired by a bunch of different locations in the real world, such as France and Hawaii, amongst the standards that you would expect, like Japan. The fact that we have over 802 different Pokemon is unbelievable to me. I started back with Gen 1 with only 151. Not to mention, some of these Pokemon have incredibly deep mythologies that's added to the depth of the world and the history of the franchise as a whole. Not only do the video games take us to this realm, but the wildly successful anime has also added to this. Pokemon took the world by storm, and honestly, it's still going strong to this day.
Number 7, Nirn.
So what the hell is Nirn? Well, coming in at number 7 on this list, Nirn is the world that is actually the proper name for the Elder Scrolls series planet that exists. Specifically, if I were just to pick one part of that world, it would be Morrowind. I'm a fan of the Stranger in a Strange Land premise. It's why I like Numenera so much on the tabletop realm. Furthermore, Nirn has just an insane amount of lore behind it. You could spend hours reading these real books that they've put into all of these different Elder Scrolls games. And of course, it introduces this idea of Chim, which is basically just an existential mindfuck. Seriously, if you go down that rabbit hole, just be prepared, because it's got all kinds of weird ideas, and I'll just leave it at that. But Other than that, each of these games in the series is focused on a particular setting on the world of Nirn, and really each game is set in a different time period of the world, usually moving it forward. That being said, one of the games, though, the most recent incarnation of the Elder Scrolls series is Elder Scroll Online, which we got to go back into the past, and it actually encompasses more of the entire world than each individual game like Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, whatever. So it's really cool to see that in Elder Scroll Online, and especially the most recent expansion that came out with Morrowind. It's great to go back there to get that feeling of exploration that I felt as a child whenever I booted it up on my Xbox.
Number 6, Overwatch.
So this is probably the newest franchise on the list, but damn is it a force to be reckoned with. This is a hero shooter, if you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, and it oozes personality. The world and lore is doled out into these bite-sized chunks, and the way that everything's woven together is nothing short of masterful. Each of these games' characters are so lovable, and it spawned so much intense love for this world that Blizzard has created. It's our own world, but set in the not too distant future, but distant enough. And as you see it, you see all of these conflicts play out, you just want to know more and more. And the way that the setting's being handled, they give you just enough to tide you over until that next information drip comes along. It's a real joy to have that sense of discovery along with the entire population that plays Overwatch and the rampant theories that they make. It just makes it so enjoyable that this is the world that we get to play in.
Number 5, Xenoblade Chronicles.
So really, how much more epic can you get than a Xenoblade's world? The world itself, if you're not familiar, the story in the world unfolds on these two giant, what are essentially gods, that have defeated each other in the past battling. This particular setting is by far the most imaginative on the list. Also, it's not just the fact that you live and breathe and thrive on these titans, but it's the sheer expansiveness of this open world field that you have that's nothing short of amazing. Many times if you look up, and I use that word loosely, you can see the other titan, what is supposed to be thousands and thousands of miles away in the sky, and it's breathtaking every single time. So no longer are you just on this big sphere, you are literally playing out your life on these two huge gods. Like I said, it's just breathtaking every single time. And these environments on these giants are just mind-shatteringly beautiful. Paired along with the music, it just gives you such a strange and wonderful, magical atmosphere.
Number 4, Zebes.
Or Zebes, or whatever you want to call it. I call it Zebes. I've seen a lot of people call it Zebes, but it is the planet that you should instantly go to whenever you hear Metroid, or at least it should be. And I have to say that this is just barely edging out Talon 4 for me, because I do love Super Metroid and Metroid Prime almost the same amount, but Super Metroid's one that I've played just so many times. An uncountable amount of hours of enjoyment have been from that game. The sound design, the flow of the game, paired with the alien nature that the planet takes you to, is really just otherworldly, pun intended. The feeling of isolation and exploration is second to none. Super Metroid's really where Zebes shines as you encounter parts of the world which makes you want to know more of how particular portions of this world came to be. And actually we do get some of that in Zero Mission, which is really cool. So because of that, I mean, Zebes gets my vote. As I said, I could be easily swayed by Talon 4 being here as well. That game is oozing with atmosphere, but both have the great visuals and sound design of pure ambience that you should look for whenever you're playing in one of these worlds.
Number 3, Mega Man franchise.
So this one may be a little bit strange to be on the list, and I personally agree with you, but I'm not just looking at the original Mega Man franchise, like the classic Mega Mans. Really, that's nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, yeah, it's in 2000XX or whatever, but specifically for this, I'm looking at the entirety of this Mega Man universe taken into account, at least the ones that connect with each other in at least a superficial way. So with that, I am talking about the classic Mega Mans. I'm also talking about the Mega Man X series, and then from X to Zero, and then to ZX. And there's some pretty interesting revelations that's happened across these different series, and some portions are not necessarily brought into the spotlight, which leads to speculation. And if you haven't got that already, I love speculations by the communities on the internet. It's so fun to read everyone's different thoughts. So this whole Mega Man franchise, going from Mega Man, going to X, going to Zero, and then going to ZX is just crazy to try and see how all of these things fit together. And sometimes, you know, it's a little bit too much for a simple platforming game, but aside from that, taking the game aspect out of it, I love the rise of the Mavericks and Sigma, as well as all of these super interesting parts that take place later down in the line in the far future with the X and Zero characters. I love it. I love Mega Man, and that's why it's on the list. It was one of my first games ever, so that probably helps it too.
Number 2, Grand Pulse.
So, alright, this one's probably going to be one of the more controversial ones on here because a lot of people, let's be fair, they don't like Final Fantasy XIII. In fact, the majority of people in a Final Fantasy group have a passionate hatred for Final Fantasy XIII. And while I admit 13 is not my favorite, 13-2 actually is. I love the crap out of 13-2, and it's one of my favorite games from that generation. But I'm just talking about the world that they've created, not necessarily the games in and of themselves. So here we have the trilogy of 13 delving deeper into what was set beforehand with the Fabula Nova Crystallis mythos for these particular games in this series, and it's right up my alley. To explain, there exist these huge overlord types of characters known as Fal'Cie. They're kind of similar to Xenoblade's gods, but not quite in that epic of a sense. But they are super huge creatures, and these Fal'Cie oversee special areas of expertise, and it really gives you a sort of David and Goliath unwinnable type of feeling, where you, and I say you as the population of humans, are basically these things' puppets, for lack of a better word. Given that, and reading into the lore, you know, aside from the game, which could have been better giving you that lore, but once you do go and read it, talking about the setting is just awe-inspiring of how much thought went into this game. I absolutely love it, and I do enjoy how it plays out over the 3 games in the particular Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. And I know a lot of people would set it in Ivalice or something like that. I do really enjoy most, if not all, of the Final Fantasy settings, but this is the one that I had to pick because, I don't know, I just like it. It's my opinion. And I'm sure it's probably not on most people's lists, but hey. So some special considerations here, at least what I could think of off the top of my head, go to Azure Striker Gunvolt, which is a very new game, but I love that particular setting. Azeroth, of course, from World of Warcraft. Then we also have Spira from Final Fantasy X, Ivalice, could throw in Talon 4 there just to complete that collection. But, you know, maybe I'll do another video and talk about 10 more settings that I really enjoyed.
Number 1, Hyrule.
What else could it have been, honestly? Of course, everyone knows Hyrule. If you don't, then you should go to the doctor. I could specifically point to a singular game's take on Hyrule, but I'd rather just take it all in stride here. Let it be known that I am one of those stupid timeline theorists that you hate, I'm sure. I love this kind of stuff, though. It's always interesting seeing how everything could fit into place. And with that, in some of the games, the story really takes precedent to flesh out the mythology, like Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time immediately come to mind, while other games really expand on the idea of what Hyrule is in and of itself and how it's changed throughout the centuries. These callbacks that you see in these games are awesome, and I'm just a sucker for that kind of stuff. On a particular note, as far as the lore goes with Hyrule, I'd love the Master Sword in its resting place going from the Temple of Time that we know in Ocarina to the forest that we see in A Link to the Past. I'm always curious to see how the developers of these games connect that, and Twilight Princess does an amazing job because, well, I really don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't played it yet, but I'll just say that it ties into the Temple of Time and then the Lost Woods immaculately. I absolutely love how they did that. Anyway, there's so many iterations of Hyrule, and that's just what makes it fascinating. Wind Waker's Hyrule is a huge part of the plot itself, and it's not simply a backdrop. So not only is this just a place to play in, it really is its own character in a sort of way. Of course, the most recent iteration of Hyrule is Breath of the Wild, which is obviously breathtaking, and it leads to more questions actually than it does answers. And that's just kindling for those like me who want to see where this particular part of the puzzle fits in. Along with super deep creation mythology that spans all of these games, Hyrule is easily my favorite to get lost in, and it's my most formative of my child years. Thank you all for watching. What is your favorite video game setting? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Be sure to like this, spread it around, if you like what I'm doing here. We're still a super tiny channel, but we are growing with your efforts, and I appreciate it more than you could possibly know. But anyway, as always, until next time, Mr. Warriors, keep on gaming.